So, if you've been following this channel for a while, you know that one of my biggest gripes with the Xbox One X has been the fact that some games were going to be held back because of Xbox One hardware. I'm specifically talking about frames per second. So if you remember, let me take you back real quick if you don't. Back last year, Microsoft was asked specifically about this. From Game Informer, we asked specifically whether there would be different frame rates for the same games running on Xbox One and Scorpio. Microsoft responded, no, there wouldn't be frame rate difference because typically the frame rate is determined by the game developer and what's right for gameplay mechanic. You don't necessarily want to create two different mechanics for two different configurations. And if you remember, I came out pretty hard against this because you have different configurations on PC every single day. If you buy a new piece of hardware, it makes no sense to not make full use of that hardware and say, well, you know, you've got a machine that's the most powerful machine out there. It's so capable of running games better, but some parts of it are going to be tied down because of that older hardware. But just know that it's the most powerful console, even though we're not fully using that power. And so you have games that are running at 30 frames per second on Xbox that are running at 120 frames per second on PC. So no, that argument that the developer wanted the game to be running at 30 frames per second also doesn't make sense. But the good news is we are seeing our first power breakout game, and it's a huge one with PlayerUnknown Battleground. In an interview, here's what the dev said about the Xbox One X. Definitely on Xbox One X, 60 frames per second. On Xbox One, we're not sure. We may have to limit it at 30 frames per second, maybe. But the last time I saw it, it was running at about 30 to 40. We're still constantly improving it, so you know the aim is to get to 60. That's why we're doing game preview, because I think the great thing about console is it's locked hardware system, so we can do really specific tweaks that tune it for those systems. I have great faith that we'll get there. The great thing about Battlegrounds is that it's not unlike the more high-paced shooters. Frame rate isn't that important. Yes, it is important, but it's not as important for us as a Twitch shooter. So we're aiming for 60. Not sure if we'll get there, but that is our aim. So I think they are sort of covering their tails by trying to downplay the frame rate by saying it's not that important. Look, if it wasn't that important, they wouldn't be trying to hit 60 in the first place, right? Anybody who plays 60 frames per second knows that it's important, but I think they're saying this because if it doesn't end up hitting 60, they can just fall back and say, hey, look, we told you before, it's not that big of a deal. Don't worry about it. But people who play at 60, that's why we want games at 60, is because it does make a huge difference in playing games. It's smoother, it's more responsive, it's just more pleasing to the eye just to look at. So I think this is fantastic news, and I hope that they receive a lot of praise for this because I want more developers to do this. I want them to take full advantage of the potential of the box. People don't pay $500 for the most powerful console in the world for it to be held back due to an inferior product. And look, I already can see the comment section before I even make this. I know that there's going to be people wanting to say, no, we don't want this because it's going to give an unfair advantage, and they're going to give you their unfair advantage speech, which you can just save it, because the idea that you've been playing on a level playing field just because you're on consoles is a fairy tale. Some people are playing with elite controllers with all sorts of features. I'm not talking about just the Microsoft Elite controller. You have other producers out there that do all sorts of funky things with the controllers. People have better surround sound so they can hear people better. Playing on TVs or monitors that have less latency than maybe you do. Playing with mouse and keyboards. Playing on 4K whenever somebody else is probably playing, you know, at 1080p or even 720p. So people are going to be able to see or distinguish things in the game that other people aren't. So nobody complains on PC about playing against somebody who's at 144 frames per second while you're playing at 60. Like, that's just life. If you don't like it, then maybe you need to upgrade. So people play at different frames per second all the time. It's not going to break or kill anybody. So this, great news, and I'm glad Shannon and Microsoft was wrong with their initial comment about frames not being different on the consoles, and I hope more devs choose to take full advantage of the Xbox One X. Put me on team no parity. That is it for me, the Red Dragon. I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.
Are you listening? Damn.